today to do kind of a summary of my reading journey through 2019 based on kind of what I've been cataloging on Goodreads. I have been tracking what I've been reading, and I'm going to go over kind of my year in stats, and then I broke it down a little bit further into kind of the genres I read, and that's letting me see what I want to do in 2020, and I'll put out another video that'll be my 2020 kind of reading challenges and kind of expectations of myself going forward. But for now, I'm doing my 2019 reading retrospective. So, pardon me with my very poorly used prop. I'm going to start with the summary that Goodreads provides me. For 2019, I read, it says 109 books. I went through the list, and when I was adding it up to do my breakdown into genres, it didn't quite add up to that, so I'm not sure what happened to those books, but I digress. And of these 109 books I read, I have read 39,026 pages. The shortest book I read this year was 32 pages long. It was The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. It was a short story. It's part of a short story compilation by the same name, which I actually just picked up and I'm really excited to dig into. The longest book it says I read was The Secret Commonwealth by Philip Pullman. This one was 784 pages. This is actually one that also came out this year, so pretty pumped with myself. I don't typically keep up with a lot of the recently published books, but I grew up reading the His Dark Materials trilogy when I was a kid, and I thought it was fabulous, so I was really excited to dig into this. The average length of the books I read were 358 pages. That's a pretty reasonably sized book. Of the books I read and rated, the one that has the most popular or has the most ratings is 1984 by George Orwell, and the least popular is Gear and Sea by Claire C. Marshall. I think this was a standalone by this author that's part of kind of a larger series that invites individual authors to write standalones for this universe. I actually met her at a convention in Calgary in the Artists Alley section, and she's a Canadian author, which I love. I don't always know when they're Canadian or not, but I loved getting to meet her and talk to her, and I actually got a number of her books. She does write a little bit for the younger end of young adult, but the books I've read have been really good. One was called The Stars Her Eyes, I believe. It's a kind of younger young adult science fiction school setting, which was a lot of fun. Then there's the Violet Fox series. That is a fantasy series. The main character is part of a rebel group who is trying to overthrow the kingdom. And I've only read the first books in each of those series, and then The Gear and Sea was the other one I read. And it's just a really cute story. It's a little bit Iron Giant-ish feel, but it's just this really touching story about two friends and their love for each other. It says my average rating for 2019 was 3.9 stars out of 5 overall. And the book that I read that has the highest rating on Goodreads was The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu, which again, if you've not read that short story, I highly recommend it. It was beautiful and just very well written. With that, I'm going to move down into what I broke down into kind of my genre stats. I'll try to remember to put them up here, just to give you an idea of the numbers. I knew I was a science fiction fantasy fan going into making my channel, but my goal had been to try to read things other than science fiction fantasy, and I mean I was somewhat successful. In terms of science fiction, I read 22 novels this year that fell under that category. And I read a whopping 42 fantasy novels out of the 105 books I read. Then I'll move on to historical fiction. It's one of my absolute favorite genres, and I just don't read enough of it. I read a single horror book this year, and it was the graphic novel Hell by Alan Moore. I read 5 mystery thrillers. I read 2 literary fiction. I read probably 7 classics. A couple of those are modern, kind of like modern or classic sci-fi. I read 1 alternate history fiction. This is another genre I particularly like. I just haven't gotten a lot of books in that genre. I read about 4 or 5 short story compilations A lot of them were keyed off by short stories read on LeVar Burton Reads, the podcast. I read 10 contemporary. I read 3 manga. These were all of the same series. They're the first 3 volumes of the One Punch Man series, which I highly recommend. And I'll try to include a link above and below for the videos I did for those reviews. And then I read 6 nonfiction books this year, and those were all kind of in November, December, after I was inspired by Nonfiction November, which is usually done as a challenge by Olive on a book Olive. I'll include a link for the channel for that, again, above and below. She does really good reviews, and she reads a lot of nonfiction if that's something you're interested in. And that was kind of my year in stats. And like I said a little bit at the beginning, I had a really good reading year. Looking at these stats, I feel pretty proud, although there's clearly some room for improvement. I intend to continue on into the next year. And I just want to thank everybody who's been watching my videos. This is kind of the wrap for my first year of filming, and I've really enjoyed myself. I hope you've enjoyed yourself too. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.